Welcome, everyone. My name is Sabrina Paganoni, and I'm here today with our patient navigation team, Ms. Catherine Small and Ms. Alison Bulat. We are here to provide the weekly HEALEY ALS Platform Trial updates, and I see that people are joining the webinar, so thank you for that. As always, we have people who have been on these webinars before and new people. So thank you for joining and spreading the word. Please invite everyone and also this webinar is recorded, posted on our website, so feel free to also circulate the recordings. Now, as always, I'll give a brief update on the trial, just 5 minutes or so, and then we will really want to spend most of the time answering your questions. As you know, the HEALEY ALS Platform Trial is a great collaborative initiative that has the goal of testing many drugs for ALS with the ultimate goal of finding new treatments for ALS and also improving ALS science and knowledge about ALS. It's really a great collaboration. We have collaborators from academia, industry, foundations, nonprofits. So thank you to everyone who's contributing to this project. Next slide. So what we're doing right now is to test 4 drugs called zilucoplan, verdiperstat, CNM-Au8, and pridopidine. They're listed on the slide. That's what we're doing right now. However, this is a perpetual adaptive trial. So what that means is that the trial, which started last year, will remain open long-term to test multiple drugs, not just the 4 that are on the slide right now, but also more because it's an adaptive trial. We will continue to adapt and add new drugs as new drugs are discovered. In this trial, there is a randomized period, and that's the bulk of the slide. But then to the right, you can see that there is an open label extension. So let's talk about how this works from a participant's perspective. So when somebody joins the trial, they'll sign informed consent. You can see it at the sort of your left. That's the beginning of the trial. And after that, people will enter a regimen. So they're assigned to any regimen, where by regimen, I mean any of the drugs that are being tested. As you can see on the slide, at this time, we have 4 drugs. So when somebody is assigned to a regimen, by definition, they'll have a 25% chance of being assigned to A, 25% to B, etc. Equal chances across the 4 regimens. And this assignment is not blind, meaning that the participant will know which drug they're assigned to, A, B, C, or D. So if you can press one more time, there is a second randomization in this trial. And so within a regimen, participants will be randomized to either active or placebo. And this second randomization is blind, meaning that neither the participant nor the study doctor will know if that person is being assigned to active or placebo. That's sort of standard for clinical trials. Now, the process from informed consent to randomization within a regimen can be very quick, but in theory can last up to 6 weeks. So that's the maximum time that it takes from initial visit, initial informed consent, initial screening visit at the site to being randomized within a regimen. Now, if you can click one more time, you'll see that after randomization within a regimen, there's going to be a 24-week placebo-controlled trial. That's about 6 months. And that means that the participant will be assigned and will stay on active or placebo for that period, 6 months. As you can see in the graph, the placebo component for each regimen, so for each drug, is small. Specifically, within each regimen, the randomization ratio is 3-to-1 in favor of active. So what that means from the point of view of a participant is that whenever someone enters a regimen, there are 3 out of 4 chances of being on active and only 1 chance of being on placebo. However, you can see in the graph, data from placebo participants from all regimens are combined. There is a shared placebo data group. And that means that at the end of the trial, we will be able to compare each drug to a large enough placebo group to be able to draw scientific conclusions and be able to tell if the drug works or not. Then if you can click one more time, at the end of that 6-month period, there is the option of open label extension. Again, that's optional. Not all trials offer it, but we really wanted to have the opportunity for people to choose to stay on drug beyond the placebo-controlled trial. So what that means is that participants have the option to receive active long-term for several months, essentially until we know the results of the trial, so we know if that particular drug works or not. That's not mandatory. People can also choose to re-enter the entire trial and start from the beginning. They will still need to be eligible to restart from the beginning and try a different regimen. Next slide. And today I'm very excited to share that we're making progress with enrollment numbers. We have over 500 individuals with ALS that have signed informed consent, over 400 that were assigned to a regimen, over 300 that were randomized within a regimen, and we already have over 100 people who have completed the placebo-controlled trial and already entered the open label extension. As I told you before, we have 4 different regimens. 3 were started at the same time, A, B, C. That's why there are over 100 in terms of a number of individuals randomized within each regimen. Regimen D, the 4th one, was added 6 months later, and that's the only reason why we only have 33 individuals within that regimen. And so I think it's just remarkable that this is going on in the middle of the pandemic, and obviously this would not be possible without the partnership from the patient community. So I really want to thank, I know some of the people who are participating in the trial are on the line, so thank you for participating, and really thank you to everyone who is contributing to this trial in many ways, whether they are participating, supporting someone who's participating, or just raising awareness about the trial. Next slide. So at this time, we have 52 sites that are actively enrolling. You can see the list on our website. And if you go to the next slide, I also wanted to present again, we've been doing that for the last few weeks, the fact that we have a few online resources. You can start to sort of check your eligibility online. We have a new tool that was developed by Catherine and Alison, who are on the line, our patient navigation team, thanks to the feedback that we've been receiving during these calls, as well as in calls and emails that you send to them individually. If you can go to the next slide. And these are study brochures if you want to learn more about the drugs tested in the trial. Everything is freely available and posted on our website. Next slide. And these are some of the questions that we have been receiving during these weekly webinars. We then basically transcribed the questions and really came up with paragraphs that are, that can be used and are posted on our website, so that for people who are new and want to learn more about the trial, they're all posted and available on our website. Next slide. And many of you have asked for webinars, these weekly webinars that we continue to do. So again, these are all the links. We also have the webinars that have been posted about the science behind each of the 4 drugs that are tested in the trial. So you can view the recordings. Each of these has been seen by several hundred people. So we're really excited to be able to bring information to the community, and everything again is posted. So that's the beauty of the internet, that it stays there and can be shared. Next slide. And also because of your questions, we partner with Niels, and Niels is leading sort of additional webinars. So you give us so many good ideas about different webinars that are of interest to the community. And these are also, they've been recorded. They're about the drug development process, the FDA, regulatory considerations. 4 of them have been already done and recorded. And then we have a 5th one about preclinical development, sort of how to select treatments, our treatments, tested in the lab, and how are they brought to trial. So that's coming up June 23rd. Next slide. I gave a webinar with Dr. Cudkowicz, who joined today as well, on AMX35 in ALS. The recording is available, and Dr. Cudkowicz will also have a separate webinar about the entire clinical trial pipeline, also hosted by Niels. So everything is available on their website. Next slide. And last but not least, please contact Catherine and Alison anytime. They're available to answer your questions. And again, I'll just leave the slide up for a few seconds before we go into the Q&A, so that everyone can write down the information. Please contact Catherine and Alison. And I see that there are several questions already piling up, so perhaps we can move to that. Oh, Mary, did you want to?
Hi. Yeah, thank you. Hi, everybody. Sorry, it's a little late. We have a couple questions coming in. One is just actually for us to help is whether we can send the links that we have in our slides, put them in the chat so people can take them down, or in an email. And Catherine, can we do either of those?
I can do both. So I'll be working behind the scenes to finagle it in the chat box here, but you can also email me directly and I'll inundate you with resources.
Great. That's a good idea. Well, we can do that in the future as well. Another question, Sabrina, as far as enrollment goes, is full enrollment 640 people? And so there are 370 people on active or placebo plus 108 in OLE. That makes 478. Is that a correct interpretation of how full enrollment stands? And how can we speed it up? I don't know if you want to go back to the slide, or you can just answer.
Yeah, maybe, Molly, if you could go back. So essentially we have each regimen is 160 people. So for 4 regimens, the total enrollment is 640. You are correct. So that's what we're targeting to fully enroll 4 regimens. So there were 370 more or less. I think we're going back to the exact number.
Yeah,
370 exactly randomized within a regimen, within A, B, C, or D. Of those, 108 have already finished the period. So the total is not 478, but it's 370 in terms of the number of people that have been enrolled so far. So the 108 is a subset of the 370.
Yeah, so I'll add here that the first 3 regimens, A, B, and C, will be finished when they get to 160. So so we do not have to get to 640 to have those 3 done with enrollment. But you're right, for all 4, we need to get to 640. And while there's 370 that are on active or placebo, as you see, there's 426 that have been assigned to A, B, C, or D, and they're just getting they're in that in between stage. So in a way, the way I think of it is we're have 426 enrolled, but the enrollment has sped up a lot in the last I'd say 2 months. And I go thanks to many of you here getting the word out. So I think spreading the word is one way, and we have come up with a couple additional ways to support the sites better, because part of the challenge is that sites don't have enough resources to keep up with the interest, which is so we've asked the companies that we're working with for some additional resources. Some of them can do it, some can't. So we're also raising some philanthropy to try to give sites additional funds to hire additional coordinators and nurses so that they can enroll every day instead of maybe just 2 days a week. But it's going well. So another question is, how do dropouts affect the study count and results? Did you have a number in mind for allowable dropouts that will still let the statistics meet the sought after p-value?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Yes, the dropouts, again, have been they're expected, and there's been all statistical modeling to accounting dropouts, and we're still powered, even just including those. So again, I don't want to say any numbers because I don't remember them right now, the exact percentage that was expected. Again, we are within those expectations. Everything has been modeled. However, I'm very happy to announce that we will have our statisticians on the webinars. We're still finishing the slides and preparing them. And we also have to have them reviewed by the central IRB. And as soon as that process has been completed, we will announce when the biostatisticians will be on these calls. And so we'll be happy to answer more detailed questions since they have all the numbers always available. But great question.
Yeah. I have to say again, just a commitment of the people in the study that and the retention, what we call retention, or people staying in it for the 6 months and then in the open label has been quite high. So thank you. Can you explain, another question about dropout, can you explain how someone dropping out after these following milestones might affect the study? So after signing informed consent, or after being randomized to a regimen, or while they're in the active, and then the last one, the open label? a great question.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. So, so I would say that obviously the ideal situation is that when people start, they also complete the trial, because that's the most informative for us, because we have more data. Having said that, there's a couple of things I want to point out. Sometimes if people stop the drug, but they remain in the study, even just by having phone calls or visits, even if they're no longer taking the drug, that's also very informative. So that's sort of one type of participation when people can no longer, for example, take the drug for whatever reason, or they're unable to travel to the site and they can only do remote visits. That's still very informative. And then obviously there's also situations when people, cannot take the drug and cannot be present for the visits, or either in person or by phone. In that case, that's a real dropout. So we miss the data. Now we have all sorts of models to account for that. And again, that's what the statisticians have been working on before the trial was launched. Really, it was in the design, because all of that is expected and again, accounted for in the models. So that's how we sort of correct for that. So there's models to account for, and spatial analysis to account for missing data or dropouts.
Can you comment on the 2 legislative bills introduced to Congress in the last 10 days, Promising Pathways Act and Act for ALS?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just start, and maybe Mary, feel free to add to that. I mean, I think it's absolutely great that there's advocacy, that there's sort of a lot of interest in opening up new pathways. So I think, in general, I think it's great that there are these bills to try to develop new pathways, for example, for expanded access or other ways to bring drugs to people with ALS. I mean, I think that it's great that there is this interest in the community.
Yeah, I'm super supportive of both. I hope they both get passed, obviously, to help with access to experimental treatments, but also to provide more resources to the FDA for speed there as well, and new pathways there for accelerated approval. So hopefully, I know a lot of people have been lobbying their senators and congressmen, so gotta keep doing that. So the question, and maybe we just need to clarify something about when enrollment ends and when the study ends. How can you close the trial in the fall and start the data evaluation if enrollment isn't complete? Won't new enrollees need to be in the trial for 6 months?
You're correct. So we can only analyze the data after the last person to enroll has completed 6 months of follow-up. So you're correct in your understanding. So basically we say enrollment is completed when we have the so-called basically last enrollment. And then we say actually the study, the entire trial is completed after we have finished the follow-up for the last person who enrolled.
Yeah, so for example, when we anticipate that regimens A, B, and C, because they started at the same time, will complete their enrollment. They'll reach the 160 participant around the same time. And then, yes, we'll follow another 6 months, but then regimen D will still be enrolling. And we do have what we call regimen E, which is a CELOS that we're hoping to start around that time. We want to wait until enrollment is done with A through C before starting E. So there's a question about the shared placebo. For the shared placebo, is there any monitoring needed to make sure one of the drugs doesn't result in a larger placebo effect? Could the recent positive press for the blinded CNM analysis result in a higher placebo effect in that arm?
Yeah, also great question. So absolutely, there is certainly a lot of statistical monitoring that goes on to monitor exactly for what you're asking. And basically, the models, the statistical models account for regimen-specific effects as well as shifts over time. So the statisticians are constantly monitoring to make sure that the placebos from each regimen are still comparable, so that they can actually be shared. And obviously, if we were to see any drift, then we would have to think about, obviously adapting that, maybe, doing other adjustments to make sure that we can make the same calculations. But again, that's something that's definitely a central key of the statistical models. Yeah. And maybe the statisticians again can explain that, but that's absolutely something where there was sort of something that we have been paying attention to from the very beginning, and definitely included in the statistical models.
Yeah. For all the analysis, the main comparison is to the shared placebo, but then each arm is also compared to their own just the 40 people on placebo in their arms. So there's a way to see if there are differences like that. But I definitely think it's time for us to start our biostats series. I know they're getting ready for it.
Yes.
There's a related question, and this is actually a lot of a statistical response, but we'll give the neurology response maybe. The question is, why can we not pick which regimen in the trial we want to participate in?
Yeah, so essentially the trial, the platform approach is such to be able to expedite the time to complete testing. And because we can have the shared placebo using this approach, then we can essentially reduce the total sample size, because instead of having a lot of placebo per regimen, we basically share it as discussed earlier. But now in order to do that, we need to maintain the same population across all regimens, because if people were just to select one drug or the other, then that process would introduce what's known as bias, meaning that perhaps certain people with certain characteristics would be more interested in one regimen compared to other people that would be more interested in another regimen. And when you do that, then you basically undermine the possibility of sharing placebo, which again is a key component of that, because otherwise we would have to basically have the, the same one-to-one active to placebo ratio that we know from other trials. And that will also, first of all, it's a non-favorable ratio, 1-to-1 instead of 3-to-1. And second of all, also increases the sample size by definition. So it takes more time to enroll.
Great. I don't see any more questions, which is, but if I can give it another minute, if anyone wants to write down their question, or if Catherine or Allison, you had other questions that have come to you that you want to bring up or things you want to share.
Yes, I had one question that I thought was very well asked about open label extension. I'm not sure if we have an answer yet, but there were people asked who are going to be completing open label extension before the results are actually available for the full regimen, and I'm not sure how that works.
Yeah, that's a great question. So our goal is that as long as people want access, that we can provide it. Now, each of the regimens, the companies were able to commit in advance to a certain amount. So for example, in regimen A, the UCB said, we'll continue it until we have the results. So that one is set. B did 12 months. So we are going to go back to Biohaven and ask, now that we have more of the projections, if we can amend the protocol. So they also provide it until we know the results. And similarly, C, Clean said 1 year. So we're gonna do the same with them. And D had said 6 months, but again, we're gonna go back to them and also ask. So our goal, I mean, the principle is to provide it until we have the results, but each regimen is a little different based on kind of the company's drug supply and funding and stuff, but we're advocating for it to keep going till we have the results. There's a question about whether somebody could participate from Iran or from another country, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, we don't restrict participation based on citizenship. However, people need to be able to get to the study sites. And so by definition, people need to be able to get to the US for regular visits, at least for the 6 months of the placebo-controlled trial. We do have a few international participants, in fact, but again, they have to be able to get to the study sites for visits.
Yeah. Okay. Well, with that, I want to wish everybody a wonderful Memorial Day weekend, hopefully outside and with your family and friends.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you everyone for joining. We'll see you next week.
Bye. Bye.